This video is brought to you by Squarespace. If you need a website or domain, go to squarespace.com/microphone nerds for 10% off your first purchase. This is the life, lads. So this is the biggest Micro Four Thirds lens ever made. It is a heckin' chunky boy. It is the OM System 150 to 600 millimeters, f5 to f6.3. Ridiculous. It's a 300 millimeter to 1200 millimeter focal length in full frame terms. And it can even take teleconverters, so you could actually make that 2 times again. 2400 millimeters. You could not even see the moon. You could see the dark side of the moon with this lens. You could see up a puffin's nostril. It's absolutely obscene, but it is massive. And it's 2.2 kilograms. So I'm like, ugh, getting my weights done this week. I've got the GM5 on it as a lens cap. GM5 for scale. Heckin' chunky boy. Let's try and keep a moderately open mind as I review this lens, and I'll show you what it can do. Okay, real talk. I've got to be 100% with you right now. I've been using the magnificent 150 to 400 f4.5 Pro. You know, the one that costs like the price of a car. I've been using that all day to great success, and I thought, you know what? I better give the other one a go. Better give it a try. There's no way I'm going to like it, because how can it possibly stand up to that other lens? Well, this was the first photograph that I took with it, and the extra zoom just made it look stunning. And I swear, I've had so much success tracking the puffins this evening. It's a little bit darker than I would like, so my ISO got away with me a little bit. But look at the hit rate on these burst modes with the cheaper lens. I mean, yes, it's huge. It's very, very heavy. It is what it is. But the images have actually really surprised me. The focus is super duper fast. The hit rate has been fantastic, as I've said. Though that's also largely to do with the OM1 Mark II, which is just ridiculously good. I was ready to write this off, but my first impressions so far have been overwhelmingly positive. I'm going to use it a lot more in the coming days, and I'll let you know how I get on with lots of examples. So given that we're all moderately sure by now that this is a rebranded Sigma lens, or at least working very much in conjunction with what Sigma has to offer and with tweaks here and there, I don't know what I was expecting. I was expecting maybe sluggish autofocus because it's an adapted full frame lens. Maybe something's not being quite right, maybe a little bit clunky, but it feels like a native lens. It is a native lens. The autofocus is really, really snappy. Everything is very, very nice. It's also incredibly sharp as well. I guess even though it is designed for full frame, because of the crop sensor, we're only seeing the center of the glass, which is the sharpest point of any lens anyway. So we're getting the best, most choice parts of the optics within this lens. The bokeh is nice and smooth. Shooting through things is just dreamy because you've got such a long focal length. Have a look at some of these photos and we'll have a little bit of a pixel peep. So if you were considering this and you were maybe put off because you've seen online that people are saying it's just a rebranded Sigma or whatever, don't let that put you off. It is a very, very sharp lens. I mean, obviously it's got other flaws, which I'll get to, but for the right person and the right needs, it is quite an interesting proposition. I'm gonna put it down though, because it's bloody heavy. So it is definitely not internal zoom, as I have demonstrated. The saving grace of Big White, which I've reviewed in another video, I have it here with me, this is Big White. Even though this is 1.8 kilograms, it feels really, really balanced and nice and usable and relatively light. This boy is 2.2 kilograms, but when you start extending it, the whole world just ends. And you really do start to feel it quite heavily, sort of between your shoulder blades and in your arms. You do get more fatigued with it. I have shot handheld with it all week. It's not impossible, but I do think it's one that you may want to use with a monopod more often than not. So while this lens is not part of the Pro lineup, so that means we don't have access to the 50 frames a second burst modes with it, we only have 25 frames, it does in fact offer lens sync stabilisation, and it gives you up to 7 stops of stabilisation, which when you are shooting at the long end is worth its weight in gold. Even when I was handheld in the wind, let me show you some video clips. Yes, there is a little bit of shake in it, but also Counterpoint, I'm shooting at 600 blooming millimeters. So of course there's a little bit of shake. Without the stabilisation, it would be all over the place. So the stabilisation is worth its weight in gold in this setup. You can keep your subjects in the frame without too much of an issue, and your natural body movement is much less exaggerated because of the stabilisation. And also, when you consider that we should really be following the rule of double your shutter speed versus your focal length to keep things in place, without stabilisation, we'd have to shoot at 1,200th of a second to keep things pin sharp. But the extra stops of stabilisation mean that in practice, you can knock that down quite a bit and still get really sharp images. I've got it down to maybe like 250th of a second, and as long as your subject is still, obviously, it's not so bad. And that's all down to the stabilisation working and doing its job. Now, I know a lot of people will be put off by the size and weight of this, and that's perfectly rational. I mean, if we are Micro Four Thirds shooters, it's not the sort of lens that we're used to seeing. We're used to seeing small, light, and affordable lenses. It's relatively affordable, but I'll get onto that in a minute. But it is definitely not small, it definitely is not light. It goes against the grain of a lot of what we love as Micro Four Thirds shooters. However, another thing with Micro Four Thirds, the thing that makes the system make sense, which is what I've talked about quite a bit in the past, is there are some lenses that are just hard to replicate on full frame. And I think this is one of them. Having something relatively easy to hold handheld at a relatively good price point that gives you 1,200 millimeters equivalent focal length is pretty rare. If you just value range and zoom, this is quite a hard sort of proposition to turn down for the price. I mean, what other alternatives do we have in Micro Four Thirds? We've got the Olympus 300mm f4 with a 2x teleconverter, which would give us the 600mm, but then it would give us f8 instead of f6.3. And it would also be a more expensive combo than this lens. What else do we have? We obviously have Big White with the teleconverter on that, which is built in. It's so cool. I'm just going to use this as an excuse to play with it again. It's my favourite. With the 1.25 teleconverter, this now becomes a 500mm f6.3 lens at the long end. So when you consider that there literally are no other alternatives at this aperture and this focal range, it suddenly starts to make some sort of sense. Now, for me personally, I think I'm very much in the camp of I think it's too large for what I would use it for. I think I would probably take out my Lumix Leica 100-400, which is tiny in comparison, and just sacrifice having the extra focal length. If I was a millionaire, I would take Big White any day, because even though that is a larger lens, you do get a lot of range with it, and it's quite simple and well balanced and nice to hold, even though it is a little bit bigger. I don't know if I'm the target audience for this lens. I do a lot of bird hide shooting. I spy with my little eye something beginning with N. No king. I do come on holidays where I want to photograph puffins, but I don't think I'm completely in the niche for this lens. If you're every weekend in the bird hide, if it's your passion to shoot wildlife and birds locally, then it's a damn good option, really. For the zoom that you get, it is damn good. One thing that's a little bit baffling to me, and I've seen a few other people talk about it as well, is if this is heavily based upon the Sigma 150-600 full frame lens, why is the Micro Four Thirds version £1,000 more than the full frame version? I've seen the Canon one, for example, or the L mount one for around £1,000, and the OM System one is around £2,400. So a massive price jump for essentially, on paper, the same lens. Now, of course, there are tweaks and bells and whistles that have changed the lens somewhat. We have the stabilisation that syncs with the OM System. We have the OM System proprietary lens coating that's supposed to really help with glare and haze, etc. You've also got more function buttons on this one versus the normal Sigma version. And of course, it is supposedly more weather sealed than the average Sigma counterpart. To keep it on par with the OM1 cameras, it had to sort of match that ruggedness. So there are some tweaks and some improvements, even though internally it seems to be very similar to the Sigma. Is that worth £1,000+ more? I am not one to judge on that. You let me know in the comments what you think about this lens. I think these days, with social media platforms being a little bit fickle and things coming and going, it's more important than ever for photographers to have a place online to call their own. And that's why I really value my website so much. I run everything through it. I run my mailing list. I host my photo contest over there. I post blogs for content that maybe wouldn't be great for a video, but works great in written form. It's a great place to express myself. And of course, I have my updated portfolio as well. There's a brand new feature called Blueprint AI, where you can just in a few clicks create a completely unique professional template in your style. You can make something that is completely your own with your branding and your colors. It couldn't be easier for someone like me who isn't very SEO aware and doesn't really know the nuts and bolts of it. It's all done for you and it's very, very user friendly. So check out squarespace.com. And when you're ready to launch, go to squarespace.com/microphonenerds for 10% off your first purchase. But I will say the sharpness, the usability, the stabilisation has really, really impressed me. And there's something about just having a ridiculous amount of zoom that's very, very fun. Like, I was shooting across a blooming waterfall towards puffins. I'll show you how far away they were. So that's where the puffins are. That's how far away we are. Super duper far away. And you could get very, very close to them and see everything. It's also been quite fun to pick off dramatic landscapes because on the Faroe Islands, it's a connection of 18 different islands. So at any given time, you can see across the fjords and across the sea. And having the longer focal length could give me some very dramatic results. Is it worth carrying 2.2 kilograms of extra kit for that? Possibly not. Oh my God, going through security, I've never been as afraid in my life. I had a 17 kilogram bag because I had this and the 200mm Leica and 2 camera bodies and my laptop. I thought my allowance was 12 kilograms, it was 7 kilograms. So I was like, think light thoughts, Emily. Think light thoughts, everything will be fine. And I got it into the cabin, I was like, yep, this is fine, this is fine. I got away with it, I got away with it. Nobody cared less. And I was panicking for nothing. But yeah, would I want to travel with all this heckin' chunky equipment next time? Definitely not. Pick one, and that's fine. So what do I think about this lens? In terms of it being a super zoom compared to other things in the Olympus/OM lineup, it's a more valuable proposition than Big White, and there is a heck of a lot of crossover if you don't mind having a longer and heavier lens. Emily from the future here. I just wanted to clarify that I think that Big White is significantly sharper, particularly at the long end. I don't know if it's due to just shooting further away or what, but at the 600mm side on the 150 to 600, sometimes you do get a little bit of haze and a lack of contrast, whereas Big White is sharp and crisp throughout, even included the teleconverted 500mm. I think optically this OM system lens is very, very nice and it really does stand up. There are no other options that are this long and this wider aperture, so if this is something that you absolutely want, this is the only way you're going to get it. For me, I think it is probably a little bit too heavy for me to justify. I don't shoot this genre of photography enough to justify the weight. Not even the price, but the weight of it does put me off personally. However, I've got some of my favourite shots of the whole holiday with this lens, and I'm really grateful that I've had a chance to test it out. Let me know in the comments what you think about this lens. Do you love it? Do you hate it? Is it for you, or is it completely baffling? Do let me know, and check out my other Faroe Island videos next, because I've been working hard here, working very hard, and I've got some really cool stuff to share with you.